Hotep beloveds, welcome to the Building the Lighted Temple service. Just helping some folks get in. We're all in gathering. And once again, it's a glorious moment to be here at this Temple Wisdom service. As we are building the lighted temple, we have been immersing ourselves in these primal waters each week, in this primal wisdom, the primal source for our nourishment. And we are going to be deepening these practices and deepening the metaphysical Kemetic studies in this service. And we'll be welcoming, as co-presenter with me today, our guest, Professor James Small. And we're looking to co-present together in a conversation around things that are celestial and things that are terrestrial. We want to cover the whole spectrum, and with things that are cosmic, and then we want to come, family, to earth with a thud. As we are building this lighted temple. And as maybe some of you know, Professor James Small, we'll bring on in a moment, did a review of my book, MerKaBa, Building the Lighted Temple with the Metaphysical Keys to the Tree of Life, and which was published in 2000. So here we are 2 decades later. And this symbol was revealed to me at the time and placed on the front cover as the true image of the MerKaBa energy body of light, of the tree of life. And then I would go on to write Secrets of Consciousness, but I want to bring us to this book, which is the MerKaBa energy body of light. Which was published in 2011, and so much more was revealed in that 10-year period. And here we are at the 10-year anniversary to deepen these metaphysical studies, things that maybe couldn't even be put forward until now. And so this is an opportune moment with Professor Small also joining us as it relates to these studies. And so what is what we will want to do in this Kemetic technology, MerKaBa, the Great Pyramid is the tree of life, Ka'aba, the Kemetic technology for making ourselves as beings of light, is we'll want to make connections with the projects that Professor Small is doing in the Happy Nile Valley project and film. One of the things I want to begin with, family, is to share that we cannot indwell the MerKaBa energy body of light without a conscious invocation of Nit and Chem-nu. And these are nature who, as Spirit has revealed to me, have been omitted from our tree of life and our MerKaBa, which is our MerKaBa energy body of life. So what is the MerKaBa? Well, just briefly, family, the MerKaBa, I'll hold up a picture here, is our vehicle of initiation, rebirth, transformation, resurrection, first eye activation, because we are spherical beings as the sun. We pattern our lives after the sun. African ancestors teach us this. It is first eye spherical activation. It is our vehicle of ascension, transport, empowerment, enlightenment, and service. And what needed to come forward, and I've done previous presentations that are on YouTube regarding this, but this is a deepening of getting this wisdom out, is that in the tree of life, as presented, these Necharu were not revealed. If you can see in this diagram, these, in the tree of life, these Neteru of Chem-nu and Nit were not revealed. But we can see in the flower of life, which is in Abtu, or the temple of Osir, when we superimpose the tree of life upon this, we see that there is room there. So the work that I have been doing is to further reveal these hidden Neteru. Now, it'll all make sense in a moment, these hidden Neteru. And these hidden Neteru are revealed here as in the MerKaBa energy body of light as Nit and Chem-nu. And we'll see now that Chem-nu and Nit are essential to the Nile Valley. And why is that? Let me show you a picture of them just very quickly. All of these images are in my book, but here are Nit and Chem-nu, the Neteru. And these are the MerKaBa Neteru tools of creation. You know, what we have learned in the MerKaBa energy body of light is that these tools of creation are within us. We are remaking we have the Kemetic technology right within us to remake ourselves as beings of light. We're remaking ourselves as beings of light, inwardly and outwardly, and as above, so below. And so we see these Neteru with their tools, and we have to access these tools within, just like we have the Nit's tools are the shuttle, bow, and arrows, and Chem-nu's tools are the potter's wheels. And just as we locate Tahuti within our spiritual constitution, our spiritual makeup, just as we know how in our spiritual makeup to be in higher mind, just as we locate Sebek within our spiritual makeup, we know how to be within our concrete mind, our lower mind. We must know how to access the tools for remaking ourselves as beings of light. And it is in my work of the MerKaBa that these Neteru that were hidden are revealed. And so it is two processes that needed to happen to this divine cosmogram of the tree of life, which is our template for remaking ourselves as beings of light. We first needed to know how to bend back, as in the Nut posture, and knit ourselves back together again. Bend back as in the Sankofa symbol and knit ourselves back together again. Back within the uniting of the Great Pyramid above and below, and knitting ourselves back together again. And this is what we see pictured here, is this knitting back of the tree, bending back of the tree of life, such that we have created this sphericity in ourselves because we are spherical beings. But moreover, when we are bend back and we are in tune with the nature of, and at work with the nature of Chem-nu and Nit to recycle ourselves, to re-stellarize ourselves, then we are completing our circuitry in this bending back, such that that luminosity, that light is flooding us. We just like the Nile, we flood with, we have the possibility and the potentiality to flood with light. So today we're going to move within the primal waters of the Noon, which has its correspondence with the primal waters of the Milky Way galaxy, which has its correspondence with the Nile Valley. We are stellar beings, and we are in this process of stellarizing ourselves. So how may we be materially and spiritual, and so we're going to look at how we may be materially and spiritually nourished, or materially and spiritually impoverished. And we want to look at in these works, as we look at the Nile Valley and look at what we're building in ourselves in the lighted temple, how we are raising the vibration. And to raise the vibration within us through these 7 planes of consciousness is to raise the water table within ourselves, to raise the and tap into that fiery stellar midst and substance and currency within ourselves, so that there's the flooding of light within us as a light-giving substance out into the world. We're going to talk more about these nature, and absent the awareness of these nature and the connection, how we can experience a famine without and a famine within. We'll talk about the famine stella and its significance, because we will learn that it is Chem-nu who opens up the floodgates of the Nile, and what happens when those floodgates are not fully open, such that we don't get the cubits of water that we need to grow and have fullness of life. So I want to now just take a shift here, and I want to say welcome to everyone and bring in Professor Small. Let's see. So I want to just say Hotep family, Hotep beloveds, Rosalind, Andrea, Robert, Charletta, Doug, Pata, Kathy, Baba Haru, Lester, Linda, Lisa, Loving, Martha, Mende, Nellie, Nora, Paula, Professor James Small, welcome, Rachel, Sharon, Tim, and Wendy, welcome everyone. So I want to go here. I want to get this technical thing correct. Let's see. Right, Professor Small?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're back. Okay, so we can hear you, but we can't see you. So I think we should probably, and I'll keep, as you're talking, I'm going to keep trying to figure this out, okay?
Okay.
All right. So welcome, Professor Small. Okay. And I just want to let the family know that over the since the founding of our Academy of Kemetic Education and Wellness, Professor Small has been such a wonderful support. He has come and been a guest speaker. As I mentioned earlier, he has done the reviews of my books. We have presented at ASCAC, which is the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization. And he has taken us to Africa. He has presided over as keynote of our graduation, and just and given lectures, and just been a wonderful support. It says, Martha says, it's fine, we're with you. Oh, thank you, Martha says, we're with you. So okay, anyway, and so Professor Small, you heard some of the opening that I've given in terms of looking at these primal waters, this stellar midst, and how let me just, oh, we also were in Hidden Colors together, so I want to mention that. So how are you, Professor Small? And tell us about your Happy Nile Valley project.
Well, and all attendees, I'm glad to be here. Sorry the video isn't doing what it's supposed to do, but we'll figure that out. You know, we've worked on this Happy project, and everyone understands that Happy is the ancient name for the Nile River. And the project is about economics. How do we build the economy of the Black African community today, wherever we are in the world? And we thought that Happy was the good for how that could be done, because the river, the Happy, which is an extraordinary, powerful river, the longest in the world, but it starts out with this tiny little stream in the southern part of Africa, coming out of the rivers of the Congo, coming out of Lake Nyanza, what they call Victoria, coming out of Malawi, coming out of the hills of Ethiopia. We tend to think of just the Blue Nile in Ethiopia, and those are only two of the tributaries that make up the Happy River, because those are the two largest tributaries. But the Happy River is made up of hundreds of smaller tributaries that drain into this chasm, this valley, which is really a rift in the African continent. And we liken our situation of today. In order to get a Happy River, you must have all of these tiny little tributaries make it up. You have all of these different rivers, streams, mountains, waterfalls that leads into this rift that makes up, by the time it gets to Khartoum in the Sudan, the most extraordinary and powerful river in the world. And what it brings with it is all of the Black soil and all of the decayed element of nature from it flows northward, which is downhill. And with it, all of this beautiful fertilizer and nutrients and elements that allowed the Africans of the Nile Valley of Kemet to begin to farm and to begin to get a surplus from their farming and to begin to exchange that surplus for other goods and services, which then allowed them the wealth to have the time to do other things, sheep, to explore raising cattle, to explore planting multiple crops, to explore planting cotton and creating linen and creating an enormous wealth, selling fish as a primary protein source for that part of the world. All of that wealth came about in Kemet because of the Happy River and the tributaries, the small bodies of water wealth that made up this massive water body. We're saying is that today in the Black communities around America and around the world, that our small wealth, when aggregated, brought together, will create a Happy River of wealth for the Black community, so that we would be able to do what they did in the Nile Valley Kemet. We would be able to provide the food, the clothing, the shelter, safety and security for our people that they were able to provide for thousands of years of a civilization. And if you do not let the small tributaries of wealth come together and aggregate itself and create the massive amount of wealth in Africa America, which amounts to more than $1 trillion a year, but because we haven't aggregated it, instead of having a Happy River, we have multiple streams, none of them sufficient to really develop the Black communities of the world. And so we thought that Happy was a good metaphor for that concept. And of how to unite our wealth, no matter how small it is, to create the extraordinary provider that the Happy became for the Kemetic civilization for ourselves in today's world. So that's what the concept is about.
Beautifully expressed, Professor Small, and what a beautiful concept to and connection for our terrestrial walk, and as you talk about those tributaries, and there being many of them, but just to bring together the confluence and the flooding, so that we move from that material impoverishment to a wealth. And what I want to do, family, is just reflect on the spiritual impoverishment, as well as regards those tributaries, or what we need to connect with within ourselves. And Professor, I'm sure you're in your work, you talk about Khnum, who and the Famine stela, and it is in the Famine stela that King Zoser, who in around 2660 BCE is complaining that the Nile River has only risen a certain number of cubits, and as a result, it is contributing to the famine. And so he sets out to learn who is the nature of the Nile, the source of the Nile, and learns that it is Chem-nu. And this we can learn about at length and read about. We won't do it now, but in the Gods of the Egyptians, volume 2, we can learn about this communication that is happening, where Zoser is learning about Chem-nu, and how it is Chem-nu, this nature, who opens the bolts, the floodgates. And Chem-nu is working in consort with Nit, and which I talk about in my book as these two natures that have been hidden and needed to be revealed, so that we may access them as tools of restoring not only our material wealth, but our spiritual wealth. Because if absent these tools, those water tables are within, as you know, because water is a literal substance, but it's also a metaphor for the waters of space, the fiery mist, that ethereal pre-substance that is what out of which creation is stirred, out of the noon, and we want to access those tools within us in our reconnection with Khnum and Nit. What are your thoughts and feelings so far, Professor Small, about making this connection between not only what needs to be put in place terrestrially, but what we need to do in terms of raising our water levels, which is raising our vibration? If we are dwelling the planes below and not having consciousness resonant on those higher planes, then we have a spiritual impoverishment as well as a material, because we're not building strong bodies, we're not building our temple. So I'll pause there.
This, Dr. Nelson, you are my teacher. I'm certainly yours in this area. But my understanding, I try to do what Malcolm taught us, is to make it plain. Each of these netters represent qualities and attributes, forces and power in nature and in the cosmos. But they also represent the same manifestation possibility of these qualities, our human consciousness and in our human bodies. And as we look at the external to understand function in terms of each one of these netters, then we have to try to find that corresponding function within the human character and within the human body, and then build on it. Different niches then inform you of what comes next, which one helps to build the next one. Because the human being that's living in Kemet is no different from the human being that lives in Chicago, Boston, or Harlem. The difference is, and we have history to help us, that those human beings discovered how to build the qualities and attributes and powers in nature and cosmology and in the human body, which is a replica of cosmology and nature. And when we learn how to identify these forces within ourselves, then we must study the Neters historically, as have been left in our sacred science, to learn how to develop them within ourselves. One may take something as simple as exercise deliberately for granted, but if you don't keep your muscle system functioning appropriately, then you're not able to keep your fluid system, the water system in your body, functioning appropriately. If you don't keep the water system functioning appropriately and you get swollen ankles, you get swollen legs, and it backs up, then your heart is not going to function appropriately. And then all of this comes back to what that you should eat and when you should eat it and how you should prepare it in order to make sure that the human body, your temple, is getting the optimal nourishment at the time it should get it, because there's certain times a year when we shouldn't eat certain fruits. There's certain times a year we shouldn't eat certain vegetables. There's certain times a year where we have to make sure our protein levels is higher than we do at another time of year. And we make such a separation because of the religious traditions of the West we've been brought up in, between ourselves and what we call the divine. And maybe I should go back to the definition. As I understand, out of Africa, Kemet is just one of our great civilizations. It's probably not even the greatest, but is the one that is most preserved. And so we can learn so much from it. But in all of our civilizations, when we refer to the divine, we are talking about the totality of everything, with us being a part of that totality. And as being a part of that totality, we contain the totality of the everything in terms of possibilities. And I hope I made that simple. We, in the Western world, we've been taught that God's up there and you down here, and then you talk to God and you plead to God. That's not the ancient African way. The ancient African understood what we call God. And as an integral part, we contain all of the possibilities of the divine itself. But we must learn to build those possibilities. Neters represent those building blocks that we must learn about, master, and incorporate and inculcate into our physical selves, our intellectual selves, our spiritual selves. And when we can do that environment that's created with the same understanding, we can then constantly replicate the universe as ourselves. I hope that's the best I can do in my understanding and explanation.
Beautifully expressed, Professor Small, and that's what we're doing. We're going cosmic and coming to Earth with a thud, and that's how we master heaven and earth. And then this building, you know, the work of Nit, whose name means to knit and to weave, and when we dispel her name, Nit is about entity or entifying. Nit and Chem-nu are working on levels as we understand Khepera working on levels. Khepera is, we understand the story of Khepera and how our African ancestors understood Khepera, that would lay the eggs and roll them in the doom ball, and this was a symbol of in my writing of the to be created lives that would emerge from that form. It was the the arising of Ra, the sun egg that Khepera, what would come into existence, what would come into being, all of the stellar substance on all the levels, on every scale of being, from super cosmic galaxies down to tiniest atom mineral, the whole scale of being. So Khepera, Nit and Chem-nu have those same functioning. Nit is the weaver with that shuttle, like that weaving of that primal substance into that bubbly light that forms the sheerest garment, the sheerest of garment, the sheerest of form. So she is entification, or bringing into entity, something in from nothingness to somethingness. And likewise, Chem-nu bringing nothingness. I'm sorry.
I look at, I've read your document again. I can't say I have the deepest understanding of it, but what I got, everything has process to come to realization. We know when we deal with Khepera and we're dealing with the waste, its body, and it lays its egg in that waste product and bury it to create the possibility of new life form. The new life that comes from the eggs eat the waste to get its initial nourishments in order to become. The process of becoming, having eaten the waste, would appear to that process that takes the substance in that dung that is eaten by that egg. The process is what creates the new Khepera, is that process of coming into being that seems to be governed by the concept we call Net. Because if we just think of the in the waste product, that is that ball, coming into being without realizing, there are other functions and process that had to take place for it to come into being. And without an understanding of that, as we try to rebuild ourselves, and we have insufficient understanding of all of the tools, we can have all the ceremony and celebrations in the world and symbols that we want, but if we don't understand there is a process that goes on that makes the ingestion of the dung by the new seed, that process that makes that ingestion a creation format and function, appears to me to be Nit.
Yes.
functions. But
Yes.
that appears to be one
Yes.
of
And
the functions.
yes, and that process is both on another level, is both Nit and Chem-nu, because it is Nit who is they're both working to bring into that entity. Within that dung is entities that are to be birthed. They are to be birthed. They are to come into existence, into being. And Chem-nu is the provides the earthy element, the dust element. You know, that's why we see him at work fashioning gods and mankind, man and woman, on the potter's wheel. So they work hand in hand. And it is Nit that is handling that subtle substance. You know, when we think about building the lighted temple, you know, folks will often focus on you know, having the finest garb, the finest robe, the finest threads. But when we understand the subtle science within us and tap into that Kemetic technology for remaking ourselves as beings of light, we are tapping into those nature within us, which are the beginnings of that primal substance within, where they are working in that bringing into entity, or bringing into a sphericalizing, and then Chem-nu adding the earthy dust element, which would, you know, give that more solidity. So we have the power to, whatever is understood or not understood today and going forward, we're deepening these discussions. And we have the power to remake ourselves as beings of light. This is so important now on our earth, with all the toxins and all the things that are injurious, not only to the human body and form, but to all the kingdoms, the water, the animals, the plants, even that building that fell in Florida. You know, there was a kind of corrosion happening to that. So, you know, we're in this period of things falling apart in terms of a degree of deterioration. And of course, there are things that are needing to be now in the process of destruction and dismantling and carting the rubble away. But we're picking up our pace in terms of what we are building simultaneously, and how are we building? We don't want to build in the old white supremacist paradigm. We want to build materially and spiritually, so that we have that heaven on earth, and tapping into these tools within and learning more about what is the work of Nit and Chem-nu within us, along with Herakuti, along with Ma'at, all of the stellar substance. These natures are within us, and really understanding their role.
Maybe one thing that people need to understand is that when we say heaven and earth, that those concepts trigger in our minds certain pictures. Somebody tell me heaven, and I see the picture of the Sistine Chapel with a big white man with his finger pointed, and he's supposed to be God, and a bunch of white people flying around him with wings and shit. So how do we get people to get another picture? What are we talking about? The planet Earth is in orbit, just like Venus and Mars and Jupiter and everything else. We are flying around in outer space, just like everything else. We're not sitting someplace stationary and looking at the rest of space. We're one of those objects moving around through time, moving around the sun, causing the spinning of the moon. We have a process, and to all of the other unknown ones. We're affected by all of them. The energy that comes from all of them, the light that comes from all of them. And what our ancestors seem to have understood in the Nile Valley and other places is that there is only one law that governs the totality of everything. And that same set of laws governs the totality of the human being. That same law governs the ecology and environment that we're in. And that established these things we call, they didn't establish them, I'm sorry. When they identified these things we call neters as being functions, forces, and powers and elements in the totality of being itself, and that they follow a certain law and a certain pattern. And we must learn these laws and these patterns. Some precedes others. So we can't start studying something being before we study the things that bring them into being. And so when I think of Net, and when I think of Chem-nu, I think of those elements that help to bring things into being as the function of coming into being takes place. Because when we think of Shu and we think of Tefnut, we think of Geb, we think of those as though they just popped up from somewhere. Well, they didn't pop up. They went through a process, and the process is replicated and continuous. And when we learn to understand the process, that allows us to renew and to rebuild. It's like the human body. All of the cells that's in our body today will die within the next month. All of them. And will be replaced. All the cells that make us up now. We look the same. You know, we're the same size for the most part, the same texture of color for the most part. But everything you see in the mirror today will be dead a few months from now, and it will no longer exist. Something renewed it. What is that process? Yes. What are the laws governing that process? And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the neters. They're not people.
And that is the Kemetic technology.
You know, it is an understanding of the African sacred science. And that sacred science has been passed down throughout all of our civilizations, and they've been effective to one degree or another in putting them into daily practices in their lives. And the degree to which we've lost that understanding is the degree to which we've become slaves to other people and other things. And so when we talk about building the lighted temple, storing the human being as a replica of the universe itself, yes, and its functions. And it's not an easy task, because you do have to study, yes, and you do have to learn, and you do have to implement what you've learned in your daily lives and your being. And you do have to innovate it on, because some things is not useful today that was useful yesterday. And some things that wasn't even there to be usefully understood yesterday is here to be usefully understood today.
Beautifully.
To weave temple again.
Yes. Beautifully expressed, Professor Small. And it is, you know, re-immersing ourselves in the primal waters of space, in the fiery midst, in the you know, that primal substance that we may renew ourselves. And this Kemetic technology is so important now. I mean, if you think about the coronavirus, I mean, you know, we have this man-made so-called administration of, and then
man can't make anything. What they do is mutate things. They injure things. They injure the virus.
Yes, yes.
And they try to merge something else into its genes.
And so
strong
where our role is to tap into that stellar substance, that we may remake ourselves as beings of light, that we may renew ourselves, ourselves in ourselves, CELLS. I just want to just read for the group just a moment, just what are Chem-nu and Nit? What are they? Nit and Chem-nu they're correlated. They are synonymous. Both are male and female counterparts. Both are the oldest Kemetic Neteru, dating back to pre-dynastic times. Both bear symbols of the scepter, ankh, and crowns. Both Nit and Chem-nu are self-created, creating somethingness out of nothingness. They are at the beginningless beginning, both fashioning humankind. Nit works with a shuttle, Chem-nu works with a potter's wheel. Nit or Neith is considered a great mother and is synonymous with Neteru, with the Neteru Aset, Heteru, and Nun. Her name means to knit or weave. She is associated with the power of protection, the power to conceive and bring forth the new sun god daily. I mean, this is Nit on her own, just the bringing forth the new sun god daily. But what about her counterpart? Chem-nu, likewise, indicates a creative process and means to unite, join, build. He made the first egg from which sprang the sun, and he made the gods. And he fashioned the first man upon a potter's wheel, and he continued to build up their bodies and maintain their life. Chem-nu wears the white crown of the south, which is complementary to his female counterpart Nit's red crown of the north. Like the Nesu Biti, the king Namur, in uniting the land of Kemet, these combined crowns are the symbol of unification within us, a kingdom which is both human and divine. Both are Neteru of the 11th hour. Both have titles which describe them. Both of them have titles that describe them as the father of fathers and the mother of mothers. Both give birth to the sun god Ra. Now, wouldn't we want to tap into these Neteru within us? And this is what MerKaBa is about. And I do hope and I do sense, Professor Small, with this Happy Nile project, there'll be and anchoring back to the source of the Nile. We're going to get back to draw the veil back further to these hidden Neteru and begin to utilize these tools. So your project is a mighty work in that effort.
Well, the key thing, I think, is to understand that the Nile and what we call Kemet, we tend to focus on the Nile and the Kemet. Definition of Kemet then, because the Nile also runs through Sudan. The Nile also runs through Uganda. Yes. The Nile also runs to Ethiopia. The Nile runs to Tanzania and Kenya. The Nile runs to Malawi and down to Mozambique and coming out of the Congo. So when we think of the Nile, we got to make sure that we are not limiting it, because each of the Neteru that we are able to read represent the time when the human beings, the African human beings, came into the realization of the function. And each of them in the different times will name the function something. We don't want to get caught up on the naming of the function and miss what the function is. So I'm glad you read the definition of Nit and Chem-nu, because it is the Nile is one fundamental symbol of how all of these functions take place. But if you were to study the Niger, you will find the same function. If you were to study the Great Zambezi, you will find the same function. If you will study the same Senegal River, you will find the same function. The blessing is, because of the ecology, especially of the northern sector of the Nile, the desert, sisters were able to discern, was preserved for us to reference that you have done so very well to bring it forward. And so we have to find out now, what was the primary motivation? People weren't running around trying to create gods and understanding God. People were running around trying to figure out, how can I find food? How can I find shelter? How can I find safety, both from the weather, from the and other human beings? And in the course of trying to satisfy the primal needs of food, clothing, shelter, safety, people had to pay attention and study the function of nature, the function of cosmology, and the function of the human body itself. And then what is the relationship between the human body and its function, the cosmology and its function, and the environment and its function? And are those functions the same? And in the end, they took of the other. And so in all the languages I've studied, when the African is deep language speaks about creation or about what we call God or the divine, they refer to it as the totality of everything, or the totality of creation. But once you make that bigger statement, you must now break it down in order to understand it. And I think and hope that that's what we're trying to do.
Yes, yes.
Today, we see the world as a total unity, and then trying to understand the elements that make the total unity. The European sees everything as pieces and divided, and he's trying to take the divided piece and make a unity. Well, you can't do that. You must have the totality express itself in order to understand the element that created that expression. You can't have unrelated elements and then try to create a singular expression. And when we follow Western religion, whether it's Christianity, because we call them religion, but these are sciences. When they first founded Christianity, they weren't talking about worshiping Jesus and dancing around in a damn church. They were trying to look at the science of the universe based on the symbols they had gathered from Kemet, and trying to have it reflect in the cultures that they came out of. And that's the same thing with Judaism and Islam. Here's a people without an understanding of nature.
Yeah.
Coming among us with their barbarity, having defeated us, realizing, I too want to be united like these people in this oneness. But they were only able to take fragments from the periphery of our sacred science system and form these so-called religions. But our minds are governed today by those philosophical, ideological, and belief systems they call religion. And we've got to untangle that. And building the lighted temple is really all about. And so I'm saying this to the attendees for people to know that we're on a journey where you have to dismantle something and then you have to build something. And building the something, the lighted temple, helps you dismantle the other thing. That is the poor construction. And I know my sister and teacher referenced the building down in Miami. Yes, the inspectors told them the cement was deteriorating. Actually, somebody tried to save money. So instead of putting 2 shovels of sand, they put 3 or 4 and stretched the cement, but did not create the strength that would give it longevity that it needed. And because I know enough about building to know that what makes cement deteriorate, besides the external ecology that's working on it every day, the salt, the water, and that sort of thing, is a poor measurement and mixture of the substance substance in the first place. And so that's the way we have to look at life. If you don't have the understanding of the netters, like Dr. Nteri has brought us the knowledge of two netters that you never see others discuss. So if you don't have a true knowledge of all of the elements of netters, then you may even build what looks like a beautiful lighted temple, but it will crumble under certain stress of life because you're missing certain netter ingredients. The building the lighted temple becomes important when we look at what she's done in her work and introducing these other aspects that we have to incorporate. Because we see many people, they dress like they understand the spiritual Kemet. They talk like they understand the spiritual Kemet. But then when you look around them, you don't see their life reflecting the spiritual Kemet. And that's because they were missing certain ingredients, unless you get to step 3. You can't get to 3 unless you get to 2. You can't get to 2 unless you get to 1. Some people want to get to step 6 without doing 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And thinking that that's simply the way the process works. No, you must have a clear understanding of all of the elements that makes up the building. The water to make the cement, the sand, and you can't just use any sand, to make cement. Sure, the beach is the better of all sands to make good concrete, and then to have the stones that you crush to get the concrete to use this. And so when we think of building the human body, when we think of building the human spirit, when we think of building the human soul, it is imperative that you have the right ingredients. The netters are the ingredients, but the process in which they come into your building process and concept is as important. That was just my little take.
Beautifully. Oh, so beautifully expressed, Professor Small, so beautifully expressed. Now we typically go to 12:15. I did want to ask you a question. I hope when we are practicing exactitude. We are practicing being precise, and we're not church. We're going to be here all day and that sort of thing, because we have things to do, places to go, and people to see, and so this, we come in and we get that full primal nutrient, no derivatives, no synthetics, and that primal wisdom, and then we go off and do our work in the world, which is to fulfill our life purpose and service. But if the group would just grace and grant me this, I spirit guides to ask you the following. In our, speaking of the nature, in our MerKaBa, in our tree of life, we have Herakuti, which is polar opposite Ma'at, and this is right. This is Ma'at, right, and might in balance. And Herakuti is how we assert the fullness of the one true self without diminishment, without impoverishment. How do we assert the fullness of who we are, the one true self, without diminishment? But at the same time, not transgressing on the rights of others to do the same, to fulfill the one and the same true self everywhere. So that's the balance that must be kept between Ma'at. So it's knowing the natures and how they are at work in us. My question, Professor Small, is given trying to hold that balance, especially with so many aggressing against African people, and how to be assertive, how to be in our warriorhood, our warriorship, how to assert the fullness of the one true self, so that we may have the liberty and the freedom and the full water tables of our growth and development and expansion. Just if you could offer some, you know, and we need the spiritual armament. Some folks are steeping now in the collection of material armament and trying to fortify themselves, et cetera, et cetera. We want to turn to you as your prime example and expression as a spiritual warrior. What words of wisdom would you offer to today?
Well,
and this will be in part
that what we call wisdom is simply the appropriate application of knowledge. One must seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. And one must seek an understanding of that body of knowledge from the cradle to the grave. Then one must apply it in their every instant, their every second, their every minute, their every hour, that body of knowledge in as appropriate way as possible. Everything in nature deals with the polar opposite, everything. In physics, they refer to it as the cause and effect. Matter of fact, sadly, much of what Westerners call their science is their stolen African spiritual systemic understanding that they now use and claim and call science. The laws of the physics haven't changed. The ferroachromaton to now. The way geometry works haven't changed, okay? When we say ma'at, we talk about the scales. That scale has two trays, two sides. It's not a singular thing. What is, we pay attention to the two pans and the change of the scale, but ma'at is the thing that sits in the middle of the two pans, you know? And so without the cause and effect, without, you could not even get life. That antagonistic friction is absolutely necessary. But it's about studying. People must study history. They need to start by reading your book and using your bibliography. That's how you proceed in this kind of study. When you come into a lighted consciousness that's yours, and you've produced a body of literature, the people should study that body of literature. And then follow your trail to expand the study of the body of literature so that they can begin to recreate themselves, because this is about recreation. Something has already created us. We're full adults, we're sitting here. What created us, you know, intellectually? What created us spiritually? What created us psychologically? What created us emotionally? Well, something has, because we exist. But we've learned that created us to see the world with the view that we have is not appropriate for optimal development as lighted human beings. So now we're on a course to try to find another way of recreating ourselves. And that's what I think this process is about. And my best reference is to tell them to go and pick up the Great Pyramid is the Tree of Life, MerKaBa. They need to go and pick up the lighted book on the caress mass to understand that something has given you the illusion that you have been created, and you're not. You're still in the state of what we would call dead. But something inside of you that demands to live have sent you to this course, because it realizes of itself, it is not the lighted temple it was designed to be. And so I say, study the bibliography attached to this body of work and begin the transformation of self through that literature. And what you'll begin to find, you've heard people say, when the student is ready, the teacher will come. Well, the greatest teachers lives within you. but you have to prepare yourself to hear that great teacher or those great teachers, because no one listening to our discussion is any lesser being than me or Dr. Nteri. You have, and greater, if your imagination can take you there. And so you have to be willing to want to create that lighted temple. You have to be willing to want to become what Ra symbolizes. You want to become what the sun symbolizes. And I'm gonna end with this, you know, like every human being is a sun. Every human being. Yet at the same time, every human being is a moon. Because as the sun, you give off light. That is, as the moon, you reflect light that is given by someone else. So we are all things at once, but we've got to understand the function and at what time do we recognize ourselves in the different functions. And that's what the study and studying to understand the tree of life and studying to understand the Neteru will lead you to, so that you're in control of your breathing, you're in control of your eating, you're in control of your exercising, you're in control of your emotions. Love is not a set of words. Love is a function that is universal in its being. Love is as much a living organism as you are. And you have to have a relationship with it. And that relationship you have with it has to be between it and yourself. If I can love me, it's easy for me to love anyone else. If I can't love me, I will never truly know how to love anyone else. And I won't even recognize when someone else loves me. And so bringing self to safety, primal movers for why you want to do anything. Because if you can't provide those, you can learn all you want to learn. You're going to die. You're going to be homeless. You're going to be poor. You're going to be impoverished. So you've got to understand what the primal motives are for why we built the happy civilization in the first place, the Kemetic civilization in the first place, and all the other replicas of that that happen across the world. So study, gain knowledge, gain understanding. That's basically.
Beautifully expressed, Professor Small, and you know, I concur. The greatest weapon is our, you know, our words, our what we write. You know, the tongue. Our greatest weapon is to put out the wisdom. And I remember when I went with my books 20 years ago to visit. Dr. Jeffries, Lynette Jeffries, and he had looked over what I had written, just as you had looked over what I had written, and Dr. Jeffries, you know, tried to, you know, just kind of let me know that, hey, these were, you know, this was a weapon, this, you know, and I needed to have a certain walk. A certain warrior walk, and I'm still in that warrior walk as you are as well. And it has just been a pleasure today to have you gracing this space. And we want to invite you back, and you will come back.
And we'll get the picture right the next time.
Well, yes, you'll help me.
Okay.
Yes, someone will help me figure that out. All right, Professor Small.
Dr. Nelson, it was an honor and a privilege, and I thank you and your audience very much.
We thank you. We thank you. And just to close, I have this beautiful plant here. I'm just going to say, Anejarak, I seek your face. Kunum, Anejarak, I seek your face. Nit. Anejarak, I seek your face. Hapi. And Anejarak, I seek your face, each and every one of you. Thank you, for Professor Small. Mir Asha, much love to everyone. Tim says, thank you. Oh, I missed the chat. Let's see. He said, we have some things in the chat. He says, thank you, Dr. Nteri, and Baba Small's beautiful analogy of paying tribute in being tributaries on the economical level and spiritual level as well. Let the water, wealth, life flow so it can continue to flow. Thank you so much. Everybody's just, we're with you. I have always wanted to learn more about the process described, transfiguration, and so on and so on. Thank you so much, everyone. And look forward to seeing you next Sunday. Peace and love. Be well.
Peace and blessings.
Onk, Uja, and Seneb.